Snakes dragged an aborted baby through the woods. What happened next will shock you. Hello, dear guests and viewers of our channel. Brew some tea and sit back. We wish you an enjoyable viewing and listening to our stories. John no longer expected anything positive from life. In his 40s, he hadn't really achieved anything. All the time he was in a hurry and put everything off, waiting for the noon of his life, which never came. Frankly speaking, he didn't want to wait any longer. The worst had already happened to him, he thought. Lucy had left him. They hadn't just dated. They'd been together for about 15 years, and he hadn't decided to make a proposal to her. Actually, he had, but he was just picking the right moment. He'd even bought a ring. It seemed that the point of no return had been reached. The only thing left to do was to come home, get down on one knee, and say those very words. Lucy had dreamed of hearing those words ever since they had moved into the rented flat together. But no, John wanted everything to match the moment, the music, the restaurant, the good champagne, and Lucy not in slippers, but in a dinner gown. As the years went by, he never proposed. He kept choosing the right moment. Then he suddenly began to feel some coldness from his darling. He told that to a colleague at work who was a great connoisseur of women's hearts. "John, I'm astonished she waited all these years. I actually thought you guys had been married for a long time. What are you waiting for, idiot? Women are such strange creatures. They all want to get married from birth, believe me. I've been married 3 times and have 4 grown daughters. That's all they ever talk about," John's colleague revealed the secret. "Really?" John hesitated. "And what's more, they don't care where or how you say it. The main thing is that you say it," his friend continued to lecture John. And what should I say?" John didn't understand. "You're a jerk. Marry me. Don't you understand?" laughed the colleague. "Do they really not care at all?" John still couldn't believe it. "Even if you make it in a lift, you wouldn't believe it. I proposed to my second wife in a lift. I bought the ring, I'm on my way home from work, and she's walking towards me. We rarely get home at the same time, so I thought it was a sign of fate. Why should I hang a leg? We got in the lift, I got the ring, got down on one knee, and done. The main thing here is spontaneity. It adds sincerity," shared the colleague with his experience. John decided that he would return home and propose to her right on the doorstep. Encouraged by his decision, John walked home. He didn't even buy a bouquet of flowers. Why should he? It's all about spontaneity. And then he was home. It was strangely quiet and the lights were off. Maybe something had happened. "Lucy, Lucy," called John. He fumbled with his palm for a light switch on the wall and pressed it. The light came on in the hallway, and there was an oddly cold feeling. There was a note on the shelf with a bunch of keys on top. John's hands shook. He realized everything without reading the note, sat down in the hallway on a poof, and put his arm around his head. He was just 1 day late. If he had decided to make it the day before. John sat in the hallway all night. He was unable to even move from his seat. By morning, he got up and read the note. There were just 4 words. "I'm tired of waiting." That's how a few words can make a person happy as well as break a person's whole life. John went to work and quit his job. The flat he and Lucy lived in was rented out. There was nothing to keep him there. John went back to the village where he was from and got a job as a forester. For some reason, he had thought at first that the outdoors would be much easier for him, but it turned out not to be so. It turned out that he didn't know anything about life. He didn't know himself. During the long walks in the forest, when he was off by himself, all he could do was repeat the thoughts about Lucy in his head. It wasn't getting any easier, and John already felt like he was driven into a corner. He crouched down on some log to take a break. John was exhausted not so much physically as mentally. He was sitting on a fallen tree and felt just like that fallen tree. He just wanted to lie down right there in the woods and pretend he was a log. John looked around mechanically as if he was really going to lie there and put down roots. when suddenly he noticed a strange picture. There were snakes swarming behind the log. He wasn't afraid of snakes. John could tell at once that they were harmless. But they could bite as well as a small dog, and they could grow up to 6.5 feet long, by the way. It's not difficult to imagine what kind of mouth they would have, no less than a French bulldog. There, behind the log, were just such rather large grass snakes, but that wasn't strange. The strange thing was that they were dragging a baby along the ground. It was a small newborn baby. For some reason, it was all red and blue, wrinkled like an old man. The infant opened its toothless mouth and tried to cry, but apparently its strength had already gave out and its voice wasn't sufficient. Where the snakes were dragging it to and from will probably remain the biggest mystery of John's whole life. Of course, he couldn't go past it. He chased the snakes away and took the baby. Despite the summer, it was cold with an umbilical cord stretching from its belly. Instinctively, John looked around to see if the baby's mother was nearby, but there was no time to waste looking. The forester bruised along into the village. The baby had to be saved urgently, and it needed a doctor. There was a feldsher station in the village. That's where John went. Thank God he quickly found it. John literally flew into it. At first, it seemed as if Lucy was sitting at the table, but he realized that she had nothing to do with medicine and that she didn't know where his village was. The doctor was the spitting image of Lucy. John even choked on his breath. "What has happened to you?" the doctor asked politely, and only then did she see the infant. "I found it in the woods," John mumbled. The doctor immediately started doing some manipulations and asked him to come out. Soon the ambulance arrived and the baby was taken away. All the while, John sat on a bench outside the medical station. He was curious to know what was wrong with the baby. "Barely saved, but thank God he's in good hands now." The doctor sighed and sat down on the bench next to John. She took off her medical cap and her gorgeous brown hair fell on her shoulders, which weren't visible from under the headdress. Only now did John realize that this woman wasn't Lucy, for she was a blonde. "What's wrong with the baby?" John asked. "It is premature and quite decently so. It is a miscarriage. The baby was aborted," the doctor said. "What's your name?" John asked. "Angela. And what's yours?" she answered. They had been dating for 2 months. He really liked Angela, but her age. She could be his daughter, her age seemed to suggest. "Marry me," he said, as Angela closed the feldsher station and turned around. He came to meet her after work, as Angela was terribly afraid of the village dogs. He had no bouquet, no ring, and he didn't get down on his knee. He simply put his arm around her shoulders and repeated his words again. Angela looked into his eyes and agreed. "Wow, it really does work," John thought to himself. After the wedding, they wanted to adopt the boy that the snakes had brought to John, but the hospital said that a childless couple had taken him in. John was even a little upset. But by Christmas, Angela was pregnant. Thank you for listening to the end. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Also, click on the bell icon so you don't miss any new videos. All the best.